All right, so welcome to the October User Dev Meetup, everybody. Good to see you all. Today we have Joseph here from Bloomberg, who's ready to present some ideas he had about introducing a new user dev topic or a pillar to this meeting. So take it away, Joseph.
Thanks, Laura. So again, Joseph, work for Bloomberg. We manage a bunch of Ceph clusters and whatnot there. And expanding on some of the things that Laura and Neha presented in Ceph Days and in some of the Ceph monthly calls on or engaging the community and the developers in various aspects, was hoping to share like a proposal to start up a group more focused on the S3 side of things, like S3 Rados Gateway space, because of various concern or changes on that front, right? So I'm going to go into a spew on why I think it would be useful, hoping to get, again, feedback, questions, comments from all of you on if this is a good idea or a horrible idea or waste of people's time. So again, the objectives, again, from my perspective on this group would be to, again, bring the users and developers together, right? Like to focus on what are the problems and bugs that people are running into out in the wild on running or managing clusters from a user perspective. Features like the S3 protocol, for example, keeps changing. New things get added, some things get removed, right? What is the plan for Ceph with the said things, right? Is it going to be prioritized for the next major release, or is anyone working on it? Is it something that the user should expect? It is more focused on, again, providing visibility on these things. Let's say feature X comes out on the protocol, and from a user perspective, oh, this would be great. I have a valid use case for it, but no one's actively working on it. Can we create trackers, or what is a good way to provide visibility on the fact that this is something the community would find useful for Ceph to implement? And also provide transparency, right? Like if no one's working on it, it's going to be 5 years down the road. It also helps level set expectations between the folks who are actually developing the set features and the community that's expecting and hoping to use set features, right? So there's no gaps and no one's in for a surprise like, oh, Squid just came out. I thought this feature would be there, but it's not there, kind of thing. And also, it's more of if there's enough folks wanting a specific feature, then it becomes a good conversation to have with developers who hopefully can attend these meetings as well, to engage, right? Saying, is this a technically hard problem? Is that why we can't get this done? Or is it more like, hey, there's not enough resources? Which bugs are higher priority or which features are higher priority? And more of discussions around it. And also when some of the things being removed from the protocol. For example, I think there was a announcement recently on S3 Select being put on the back burner by S3 or AWS, if I may. So more of like, hey, are we currently Ceph supports it? Is it something that's going to be supported long term? Is it going to be removed? Should the users plan for it? What would the timelines of it look like? Is it like, the next 4 years it'll get removed or whatever it be? Helps provide that transparency to the users as well, so that we can plan as a group together to make Ceph preferred backend for any S3 object store needs. It also, again, helps bridge any gaps in features as well. Say currently Ceph doesn't do it, but other S3 storage options does. Calling out those things as well. So this is, again, the general concept of having this user group. Just wanted to, again, open it up for any questions, comments, or ideas from the group that is able to attend this meeting today. Or is there anything in particular that I can clarify? Because I look at pin drop silence as either it was fantastic speech or no one has any clue on what the hell I'm talking about. I don't believe it was a fantastic speech, so.
Go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah. You might be muted, Matthew, if you're trying to speak.
Yeah, sorry, I was just collecting my thoughts. I mean, what you said seems sensible in and of itself. It's not clear to me why, and I speak as a fairly heavy user of the S3 browser gateway service, why it needs a specific user group. All those things you talked about in terms of which features are supported, which are likely to see development effort, all those sort of things would apply to, any other bit of Ceph I can think of. I wasn't quite clear why you felt that the S3 layer itself needed a specific user group rather than just, if there are concerns about how well that communication is going, that can't be handled within existing channels or existing channels improved in the general case.
So my view on it is from an S3 protocol perspective, right? That's changing a lot on us as a group, right? Like AWS decides to implement something new. There's various SDKs and workflows being built on top of it. Can we keep up that? The changing dynamics of the protocol itself is one thing. The other thing is the varying use cases. With, for example, at least again, we run a decent sized S3 um, on our private cloud as well for our customers being our internal engineers, but they run various workloads and stuff that exposes interesting things. And it might be supported, but we see goofy behaviors for it. So it's more of engaging other users to see if it's just us seeing these problems. Is this, let's say, for example, since AI is a thing now, let's say there's specific AI workloads and jobs that are being problematic, right? Is there enough people being impacted by this so that we can actually engage the developer on the gateway side to see, hey, this is something that a decent chunk of the community is being impacted by. From a tracker perspective and whatnot, like I've seen, at least my personal opinion on this is the trackers get created, the traction on when and how they get picked up, the transparency on like, hey, does anyone care? Or is this going to be worked on with some priority from the actual developers on it? I am unable to tell. It might be that I might be missing the communication channels on it. I'm on the standard Slack channels and mailing lists, but I don't know where we can focus or what I might be missing to bridge that gap. And this is again I proposed on like having some cadence, like once a month, every other month, whatever it be, touch base to see if there's anything new or something that needs to be prioritized or new issues that came up or workflows or whatnot, so that we can, there's use cases as well documented with, for example, features, right? This is why this is a problem or this is needed, which if from a developer perspective, you may not be aware because you may not be actually managing Ceph clusters. So that's the gap I'm highlighting again, at least my view on there existing such a gap, if that makes sense. Go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah, it does make sense, but it seems to me that the same thing holds for like outstanding tracker items for Debian packaging or orchestrator or almost any other bit of Ceph. I agree. There are lacuna there. I sometimes log onto Tracker and see things I opened ages ago are still languishing, even though there's a backport waiting to be approved. And I think there is definitely space for improvement there. I'm just not sure that S3 needs to be singled out in that sense, rather than, could we look at improving this in the round? But I've said enough on this now, shall I?
And this is exactly why I'm pressing this here to see if this is going to be useful or worth the effort, kind of thing. Yeah, again, to your point, there's other things I have said problems, but the reason I mentioned is like packaging and stuff, it's hopefully one and done and we fix it and it's fixed for good, but I don't know enough about it, in all fairness to your comment.
So, Joseph, my 2 cents are like if you could just share a few specific examples where you think that there is a gap in terms of what the user community thinks should be a priority and where the developer community hasn't uh, been aware of it or hasn't prioritized it. Those such specific examples might give us a stronger motivation to form a group to address those gaps until we get to a point where we feel like we don't need a specific group because we are on the same page mostly, right? So I think that might be useful to kind of address Matthew's concern.
Yeah, that is very fair. What from sharing that information, or finding whether it be trackers or examples of said things, would following up with like a survey to the community to see, or giving more of a write up so people can actually look into it, kind of thing, be a good next step? And see if, again, give some examples, more of a write up than my 2 minute spew on this, and open-ended questions, right? Or some survey kind of questions to see if this is useful and whatnot. Would that be a good next step to share that information, or what would a good channel be?
Yeah, I mean, you could certainly follow it up with a survey. You should probably run it by some of the RGW devs as well, so that they are not taken by surprise. I would also suggest if you have certain examples that you want to share with the broader community, you might be able to just send an email to the dev list and start a discussion there, and get more traction from people who actually care about the same topic.
All right. I will add that to my next step. Again, first engage in the standard weekly meeting for the gateways, and put together, again, start on the user mailing list. Any other, I guess, questions or comments from anyone else before I pass it back to Laura? Go ahead, Aicha.
Hi, I'm a student at New York University. I'm helping my university to build the storage for research network with Ceph. We just started it. Uh, I have two questions. One is, for now, if I have some questions, miss some trouble, is the Ceph user mail list the place for me to ask some questions? Or I could just send my question to their email?
Yes, that would be a good place to start. There's also Slack channels that you can join, that both users and developers are a part of. And I guess I can find and share the link in the chat here in our talks on that as well.
Yes. Because when I found the link, but in the network, in the official website, but it seems expired. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Also, another question is a more specific question. So we have already built our server and with some pods. We are kind of trying to figuring out how to mount Ceph client on different operating systems. We have uh, figured out to mount it on Windows, but we are still considering is there a way for now to mount Ceph file system on macOS without a container?
I personally do not know enough about this, but hoping the rest of the group can.
Can you repeat your question?
So for a client to connect to the server, is there a way now to mount the Ceph file system on macOS?
I'm not sure the answer.
Have you tried it? Are you running into a particular issue? Mac is not one of the heavily used operating systems, so I wouldn't be surprised if something's broken. But if you're running into a particular issue, start with opening a tracker.
Uh, uh, you mean I can open an issue where or some?
Yep. Redmine. I can post a link in the chat for you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Laura, back to you for rest of the agenda.
Sorry, quick following up on Joseph's point. Feature trackers are useful, but the RGW team at least doesn't ever scrub them. I notice them once in a while. but finding a way to make them more visible or scrubbed by teams could help. And also, like you said, if we had some way to get user feedback so that we know which feature requests a lot of people want, that would help us to prioritize stuff. The Ceph Developer Summit meetings at the beginning of release cycles are also a good place to bring these up and discuss what we think a lot of people want.
Thanks, Casey.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to help out. And I agree with Neha about a survey, collaborating with the RGW team on that. But I would also be happy to help devise something. And I think when we created the surveys for performance and everything on the first run, we kind of ended up leaving the questions more open ended, since it's kind of hard to um, you know phrase questions. Or I mean, if it's easy to phrase a question, if you just want a yes or no answer, that's fine. But if you're kind of just trying to gauge a general, like what kinds of gaps do you see in S3? That's just not a yes or no question. So an initial survey could be a bit more open ended, just to gauge kind of general interest about, and kind of gauge where people's minds are at about S3.
And again, I think I'll start with the mailing list too and see if there's enough engagement to put together
Yeah,
a survey to the wider audience. So
I
take
agree
that
with
as
that as well.
thank you.
Just out of curiosity, people on the call can use the raise hand feature or something, but how many people are using S3? Nice. All right, so we've already got some potential buy-ins, so that's great news to hear. That's Enrico, Matthew, and was that Frederick who raised their hands? So um, hopefully you guys would be able to take a survey once we have that out. We'd love to hear your feedback. Yeah, and then also just going back to Matthew's question, or his point about why S3 over anything else. Um, Going back to the purpose of the goals of the user dev meeting, um, we we started out with performance and orchestration as the two pillars that we've been asking kind of questions around, and also usability. But we've always had in mind that we want to increase the amount of topics that we cover, and essentially, if there's an interested party, and somebody willing to represent this topic or this pillar, like Joseph, um, feel free to come to us, and you can always do a similar thing that Joseph is doing by putting together, a proposal of why this topic is important to discuss in the Ceph community, and getting buy-ins from that. But another, potential pillar could be packaging, for instance. So we're always looking to open the user dev meeting into more of these topics, but we need somebody to be like a representative. So if you really care about something, you can always contact me or anybody, or Neha or anybody else here, or come to these meetings and propose a new idea to lead.
So I think I heard one thing that I, I believe there was consensus that sometimes users have a hard time understanding the status of a particular issue. They open a tracker and they don't see any movement, so they are kind of left wondering and don't know what to do next. I do want to solve this problem in a way that you at least have a way to figure out why something has not been prioritized. Like Casey mentioned, that some of the tracker categories are things that don't get scrubbed as frequently as bugs that are coming in. So for those cases, I would really encourage people to just use Slack. just use Ceph and ask a question about like, hey, why am I not seeing any movement here? And hopefully the appropriate team is going to get back to you with some sort of reason. Again, don't expect an ETA to it, but I think that's better than not asking a question about it or thinking that it's not getting prioritized for some reason.
Exactly. And one thing off the top of my head is during the Rados bug scrubs, we pay more attention to the trackers that have been updated recently, even if it's a very old tracker. Just if somebody writes a comment on the tracker that says, hey, are there any updates to this issue? That bumps the tracker immediately to the top of the list so that we can see it. So if your issue is buried in the queue and it's maybe like 3 years old, it's really helpful even to just comment on it to bring it to the top of the list. But I'm only speaking for Rados there. I'm not sure how other teams are scrubbing their issues. All right. So thank you, Joseph, for that presentation. And so next steps would be to gauge interest on the Ceph users list. You can also send it to the dev list too, because there are often overlap between users and developers. And Neha, did you have any suggestions for like how that email should kind of start? Probably like just I was kind of thinking like a broad explaining that we discussed this in the user dev meeting, and just a broad, is anybody interested in helping us understand S3 more, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, the premise what Joseph started out with is this should be probably the same with a few specific examples of why he thinks that this is a good idea in terms of motivation. Might just be helpful for people to relate.
Right. Okay. Let me write that on the agenda. So we need email to user and dev lists. Introduce proposal with examples. All right.
Will do. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. So unless there are any more questions or feedbacks, we can end the call a bit early, or we can also answer any questions if anybody has questions that are not related to, the S3 introduction. All right, I'm not seeing any hands up, so I'm hoping everybody's satisfied for today. Thanks, everybody, for joining, and excited to see where this goes. And thank you, Joseph.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.